Steve Flavell is the co-founder and CEO of LoopUp, a global cloud telephony company that helps multinational enterprises consolidate Microsoft Teams calling across over 100 countries. With that, Steve, we're thrilled to have you at the live event today, and I am very
Thank
much
you,
looking
Michael.
forward to hearing your presentation.
Very good. Well, let's dive in and give it a go. I was keen to talk today about something that may sound surprising and try and convince you all of something that, as well as all the very exciting AI stuff going on in the world, even some of our older industries can be exciting too. And I'm going to, in particular, talk about the world of telecoms, which is the world that LoopUp is in. It's an industry that's close to a couple of 100 years old, and it's kind of strange, but interesting how much is happening in that 200-year-old industry and leading to a lot of opportunity for companies in that space, despite its age. And that really stems from quite a rare combination of circumstances. Pretty rare to find an established industry of such huge size, just we're talking business telecoms here. The global market for business or enterprise telecoms stands at over $100 billion just in terms of service provision, no equipment or anything like that, just services that companies buy, phone service essentially. And at the same time, that huge industry is restructuring at such pace and on so many sort of layered dimensions. And some of those restructuring dimensions are further progressed than others, but all of them over the last 10 or so years, and many of them are brand new. And that pace of restructuring, that combination and layering of restructuring is really changing the dynamics of this established market and leading to opportunity. So let's walk through that a little bit, starting with the first dimension of restructuring and the one that's pretty much done. Actually, this has been going on for a decade plus more and is all but done, which is the so-called PSTN Switch Off. It's how it's referred to in sort of the UK in particular and around Europe, more referred to as the retirement of copper in the States. How the PSTN, which is the public switch telephone network, is disappearing. It's being turned off and replaced by voice over internet protocol, VoIP networks. Essentially, how the big telcos fit into this particular restructuring, they're the drivers. They were the drivers of this. Made no sense for them to maintain and run two side-by-side networks. They're obviously their sort of broadband fiber networks, which were and are the future, and their old sort of copper-based telecoms networks. They didn't need both of them, and so were keen to obviously switch one off. And with regulator oversight, that was driven by the supply side of the industry, looking to change that redundancy, looking to remove the need for such specialist telecoms engineers for those circuit switch networks and all the aging hardware across those networks, moving to something that's new, forward-looking, multi-purpose in terms of fiber-based broadband networks that demonstrate a lot greater ability to scale, greater efficiencies. This is a restructuring that's almost done. Most of the major networks in the world, country networks in the world, will have been fully decommissioned and switched off now by 2030, and many are already done. So this is the oldest, the most complete, but first, and it was the driver of many of the rest in terms of the restructuring dimensions. The second leads on from it, actually, which is the restructuring from enterprise telecoms that is on-premises or equipment-based, if you like, to cloud-based services for telecoms. Now, if the audience have heard of PBXs, private branch exchanges, this is the sort of switch, if you like, the telecom switch, not in the network, but that used to sit, and still to some degree does sit in certain circumstances, in companies, offices, or sites. Every site needed one at one point. And because of that on-premises equipment, there was a cost to it. It needed to be bought, it needed to be kept and looked after and upgraded from time to time, and full replacements in certain cycles. It also had constraints in that those on-site switches led to more physical, defined and restricted service, numbers related to the office you were in, and more particularly to the desk that you sat at. For a long time, and until very recently, those phones would have only rung on the desk of the number in question in the office of that PBX. And that has changed a lot over the last decade. It was also accelerated by the pandemic to a good degree. Now in the enterprise world out there, over 75% of enterprises have moved away from that sort of on-premises implementation of telecoms and into the cloud with cloud-based service. It has a number of benefits for the enterprise. They're using telecoms essentially. I won't say just another data service, because it is a business critical data service, but it's another data service over the internet, like so many others in the enterprise. All that equipment can be totally stripped out of all their sites around the world, leading to huge cost savings, both in terms of equipment costs and people costs who look after it. And also, very importantly, particularly with the way business and the workplace has developed, accelerated by the pandemic, those phone numbers travel around with the users. They're no longer physically tied to specific desks in specific offices. And the industry, as I say, is 75% of the way through this restructuring dimension. This one led to another one. And rather than the first two here, which were really led by the big telcos in the industry, this one they joined in with a little bit more reluctantly, which is the move from standalone cloud telephony services to cloud telephony services that are integrated into broader UC, unified communications platforms, such as Microsoft Teams is probably the best known. And those big telcos, nearly all of them, for many years ran more standalone cloud-based services, sometimes referred to as hosted PBX services or IP-centric services, but they were standalone. They didn't combine with other things particularly. And all of that calling data, because it was a standalone external service, was outside the essential umbrella of the enterprise. And that has been, for the last few years, particularly again, in this case, accelerated by the COVID pandemic, has changed to services that are now fully integrated and combined with broader unified, more strategic and broader unified communications platforms such as Teams. And there are lots of advantages there. Firstly, it honors the term unified communications much better. These platforms were called unified communications, but didn't always and not often include telecoms. Telecoms was separate. When you buy Teams out of the box, you have to integrate your telecoms into it proactively. It doesn't come with telecoms out of the box. And for a capability to be called unified without telecoms, it was a bit of a misnomer. So it solves that missing hole, if you like. From a user's perspective, that came with a lot of benefits, therefore, because they are able to do everything under the single pane of glass of their Microsoft Teams clients and software. They can make and receive all their phone calls, as well as doing all their meetings and video, from within the same interface, or the same Teams interface. And then additionally, for the enterprise, it solves a data problem. All of that calling data then naturally flows through Teams and into that enterprise's data sets for AI and agentic leverage. So big benefits all around through this UC integration. And this is a newer restructuring going on the market, but one that's moving with real pace now. It's been going on for perhaps 5 or 6 years, this interconnections into teams, this integration into teams. And there are now over 100 providers that offer what's called Operator Connect, which is Microsoft's sort of certified partnership scheme, if you like, for telcos who want to offer an integrated capability into teams. Now, the big telcos are many of those 100 plus providers, but as I say, they got involved with this a little more reluctantly, but had to embrace it really because of the huge market pull from the enterprise world wanting to do this because the business case was so clear. But of course, there is some sort of rent sharing, some sort of margin sharing with the Microsoft piece of things. There was some value being given away to the UC provider in this particular restructuring dimension. The fourth big one, and a very dear one to LoopUp's heart, along with the other three, we embrace all the first three as well, but this one is central to our existence as a company and one that we really try and differentiate through. But it's a restructuring dimension that is now firmly in flight, particularly in the more multinational enterprise market. And this is the move from having dozens of, a patchwork of dozens of regional, often just country-specific telcos to cover your global operations. Perhaps you're using Orange in France or a Telstra in Australia or a PCCW in Hong Kong. The move away from local or regional service provision, which required often dozens of telcos to cover your global operations, the move from that to a single global service provider who can offer telecommunications service domestically in all of those countries around the world. And the benefits, of course, are, I think, hopefully pretty clear, which is that level of vendor consolidation, often from tens of telcos down to one single vendor, can be such a cost saving, so beneficial in terms of time of management and operations and simplification, as well as the consistency of service provision, the consistency of implementation, and the economies of scale that come with it. The fifth one that's absolutely going on very, very quickly, of course, like in all industries, is the influence of AI. And this doesn't just influence the telcos, it's influencing everyone in the market, moving from more reactive networks where you come across issues and you get them reported by customers, you go and investigate, you fix them, to much more predictive diagnostics, the move from more statics of network optimization to a more dynamic approach, and a much more personalized user experience. And wherever you look in the industry, at LoopUp and across all players, this is something that is essential across the board. And then to finish, one that hasn't come yet, but one that we think might come, and again, is central to LoopUp strategy, which is the combination of two industries, essentially. At the moment, you have big telcos that are into landline services and big telcos that are into mobile services. Difficult for such large entities to consolidate pragmatically into a single service provision. But the market is there for it because this distinction between landline and mobile numbers is becoming less and less, because numbers ring on all devices, whatever they are. You can have a landline number, for example, a geographic number in different countries, 0203, for example, in the UK, and it doesn't just ring on your old landline phone anymore. It rings on all devices. Your landline, if you still have one, your PC, your tablet, and critically your mobile phone as well. Equally, you can get mobile numbers to ring on all devices as well. So there's a move we feel that's ready, the industry is ready for, which is to come down from two sets of vendors to one single vendor, to move from two business numbers. Why do you need two business numbers? to one single business number that rings and works on all your devices in the same way. And we think this is likely to be the next big restructuring dimension. That's where we see the industry having come from in recent years and currently, and that's why we think there's so much opportunity in this 200-year-old market. The opportunity for a brand new variant of next generation telco, which covers all those bases. That's VoIP based, cloud based, integrated with your UC platform such as Teams, allows for single vendor global consolidation across landline and mobile, leveraging AI and in all its capabilities. And do please take a look at LoopUp if that proposition sounds interesting.
Steve,
That's about
thanks
it
for
from
that.
me, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for that fantastic presentation. For everyone listening live, I'm sure you have a bunch of questions that have come up in your mind as you're hearing this presentation. In front of you, you have a Q&A box. Type in any questions that you have into that box, and we'll be sure to get to as many of those as we can on this next Q&A panel, which Steve will be joining us on in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Michael.